past the other line. Can I go?
Sure.
Hey,
Oh.
Governor Rick. I got a picture of Rick taking a picture.
But they're really called springtails, but they come out in the spring.
And they do what?
I don't know, they crawl around.
Yeah.
How about, I think on this side it looks pretty clear to me. See what you think.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That looks pretty clear.
Our sugaring season starts at the end of February or the beginning of March, depending on the weather. We have around 1,800 taps.
Perfect spot. You go, Doc.
It takes us at least 2 days to get completely tapped out, sometimes longer depending on how much help we're able to round up and how much snow there is. Hiking through the woods on snowshoes takes a lot longer than just being able to walk right along on the ground. While we're tapping, at least one of us will have a tool pouch with us so we can fix any problems we find with the lines while we're out in the woods.
I've seen. Want to drill another tree?
Oh, good.
Right here.
Okay, let's go to the tree. But I want to be able to do that.
That's the best thing.
Okay. I wanted to
take a picture.
now.
Around 1,200 of our 1,800 taps run directly into our sugar house. We have a vacuum pump set up on those lines to help the sap flow better. The sap comes out of the lines that are running in the woods into a small transfer tank that's in our pump room. From that transfer tank, it gets pumped up into our large holding tanks. Each holding tank holds just under 2,000 gallons of sap. We closely monitor the vacuum level that the pump is drawing. Any drop in vacuum means that there's a leak up in the system, and we have to go up and find it. By shutting off the vacuum to certain areas of the woods, we can narrow down where the leak in the system is, so we have less area to cover when we're out walking. A few years ago I set up a control box for the transfer pump that pumps the sap from a releaser tank into our main holding tanks. The control box runs on a Raspberry Pi microcomputer. The Raspberry Pi uploads to the internet whenever our sap releaser pump kicks on. That way we can monitor what's happening at the sugar house without actually having to physically be there. The sap that doesn't run into the sugar house runs into 3 different holding tanks alongside the road. We drive out with our old Ford pickup truck with a 550-gallon tank on the back. We pump the sap out of our holding tanks up into the truck and then drive it over to the sugar house. Most of the time we can get all the sap in one trip with the truck, but if all 3 tanks are full, we'll have to make several trips. After we get back to the sugar house, we use the same pump to switch the hoses around, and we pump the sap from the holding tank in the back of the truck up into our 2 main holding tanks in the sugar house. can switch which tank we pump into based on our needs for the day. We start each boil by lighting a fire in the arch. Some softwood slabs, a little cardboard, and some diesel fuel, along with a propane torch, help get things going.
Off I go? Sure.
While the fire is getting going and the evaporator is getting up to temperature, we set up the filter press so we're all ready to go when we have our first draw.
You're okay?
Yep. Here's a shot of our syrup pan before things actually get going. Once the slabs and cardboard have really caught, we add more wood to the fire. We have an automatic draw-off system with a digital thermometer to help us monitor the syrup so we know when to draw it off. As the sap boils, the water leaves, and what's left in the pan gets to be a higher and higher concentration of sugar. This higher concentration of sugar has a higher boiling point, so by monitoring its temperature closely, we can tell when the syrup is ready to be drawn out of the pan. When the syrup gets up to temperature, the automatic draw system opens a valve and it pours off into a bucket. When the temperature drops back down, the valve automatically shuts. We then check the batch of syrup with a hydrometer to make sure it's exactly the right density before we filter it and can it. We pour the new syrup into a tank. From that tank, it gets pumped through the filter press, up through some clear tubing, and into our canner. After the syrup is filtered, it's kept warm in our canner until it can be packaged into our retail jugs. We have an automatic valve on the canner so that when the jug fills up, the syrup touches a probe and it shuts off the flow of syrup into the jug. This lets us fill jugs much more efficiently. The cycle of firing, drawing off syrup, filtering it, and canning it repeats itself throughout the day. When the evaporator is up to temperature and boiling at full speed, we'll process through about 400 gallons of sap an hour. Since it takes around 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup, we'll make about 10 gallons of syrup an hour. Our evaporator is a mix of Dominion and Grimm parts and Leader parts. The arch is a 5 by 16 Dominion and Grimm arch with a Dominion and Grimm flue pan. It used to be all Dominion and Grimm. We also have a Steamaway made by Leader evaporator. It helps increase the efficiency of our evaporator. Since we got it, it increased efficiency around 40%. So we boil 40% faster and use 40% less wood to make the same amount of syrup. The evaporator uses quite a bit of wood. Depending on the type of wood, we can burn a cord of wood in about 6 hours. Most of our firewood is stored on metal racks that we transport using our backhoe with a set of forks on it. We also will use bundles of slabs from our Wood-Mizer sawmill. The slabs are harder to deal with, but the price was right, since they're mostly free and just take a little bit of processing to make them usable in the evaporator. We store our sugar wood in a shed to help it dry faster, so we have good dry wood for boiling. The shed has clear panels on the front as well as clear panels on the roof, so it keeps it nice and warm and perfectly dry. The bundles of slabs are a little less than 8 feet wide, so we have to cut them in half with a chainsaw before the pieces will fit in our evaporator. We first cut one side of the slabs, and then set the bundle down, move the backhoe out of the way, then cut the other side. At the end of the day, the filter press is cleaned. The syrup that was in the frames of the press gets put in a bucket to be refiltered the next day. One benefit of the Steamaway is it provides us with a virtually endless supply of hot water. The steam coming off of the flue pan all gets condensed and runs out into a sink we have set up near our canning station. We use the hot water to clean up the filter press at the end of the day, as well as any spills that occur during the canning process or boiling process. Any small spill can go a really long way in the sugar house, so we try to catch them before they have a chance to spread anywhere.